welcome readers, listeners, and viewers from across America and around the world. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed here on Truth Frequency Radio. I thank all of you for taking the time to be with us this evening. I'm honored to have as guest with me Joe Taylor. Joe, are you there, brother?
I'm here.
Excellent. Well, thanks. It's been a long time coming. I know we've been trying to get together for a while now, but I wanted to give you a chance before we go into the interview to share if you have website or contact information, Facebook, YouTube, anything of that nature.
Yeah, you can get the Mt Blanco website at mtblanco.com, mountblanco.com. And you can email us at mountblanco1@aol.com. And that's that. And that'll get to me either way.
Okay, great. Well, can you also tell people about your museum and also kind of, because you said you do 5 occupations and you're busy doing a number of different things. So kind of introduce people to your work and your efforts and, you know, the kind of things that you focus on, especially with the museum.
Probably my varied interests have all come together to make the Mt. Blanco Fossil Museum work. We're, as far as we know, the largest non-evolution working fossil museum in the country, if not in the world. And by working, I mean we do everything from dig it up, we restore it, mold it, mount it, do research on it, and the entire thing. We do art that goes along with it, anything that's required. Interface with other paleontologists, whether secular unbelievers or Christian creationists. The museum is not a lot of fancy skeletons, which that's great. You know, a T-Rex skeleton's great. But if they don't tell you anything about a T-Rex, for instance, if they don't tell you that it was found with things it shouldn't be found with, like T-Rex we were digging up there in Montana, it had several other dinosaurs with it, but it also had turtles, crocodiles, and 3 kinds of plants, 3 different preservations of plants, and 18 broken T-Rex teeth so far, but no T-Rex. So there's a story there. We're not sure what the meaning of it is, but a friend of mine dug up another T-Rex up, I believe, in Montana somewhere. The most insignificant thing was a little movie they showed at the end of the presentation when you went to see the thing. It was a little movie to show. At the end, it listed all the plants that were found with it. And here's a T-Rex. It's a land animal, right? So there's equisetum, which is giant ferns, big 60 to 90 feet tall, not like that today.
Wow.
There's figs and willow. Well, those things don't grow together. They were all, the only way you get those ecologies mixed is if you have a tornadic wind or a violent rushing mud and water. And that's what you find all over Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Colorado, Texas, you name it. What you find are, in some cases, 10,000 animals of dinosaurs of one species buried, and they had to be buried alive in a giant mud flow. And that thing just goes on forever. There's a dig my friend is doing up in Lemon, South Dakota. The fossil layer there is 3 feet thick, and it stretches for I don't know how far, blocks and blocks, maybe miles. I discovered one in Colorado that I call the half-mile site. And there was a layer of rock 3 feet thick that had been roached up on its side. That it was like cement. 1/3 of it was bone, and the rest of it was rocks. I mean, it's cement. And it went on for a half mile till I ran into federal land, and I quit looking because I don't search on federal land. So that tells you a lot. That's not just a dinosaur somewhere. In that half mile site, there were also crocodiles and land animals and fish. So they don't live together. They all had to be mixed together. And sometimes you find skin on these things still preserved.
Wow.
It begs the question of how in the world they get there. That couldn't be a normal occurrence. Like they die, and after a while, hundreds of years later, they finally get covered up. That just doesn't fit. And having been in all those states, and really in most of the states across the United States, up and down and across, I can tell you that's pretty much the way it is. It's mass burials from one end of the country to the other. And that goes all the way around the world. Same way when I was in Israel last year. Same thing. And then the reason we even see fossils now is because the abatement. There were two things that happened. The flood, which is a complex thing. Then the abatement, when all that water ran back in the ocean. People forget that part. That cut the canyons of Quran, canyons in North America, all over Africa, you name any country that has canyons in it, where you see the strata laid out, like in Arizona, in the Grand Canyon area. You see flat layer upon flat layer, and they stretch for miles on end. There's no way that could be a river that got out of its banks. That's not some local creek flooding. That's worldwide. And any paleontologist that doesn't know that, any geologist that doesn't admit that, is trying to keep his job.
Right. Yeah, of course. And so you're saying that the mix of the even T-Rex and the ferns and crocodiles and all of these creatures that could have only been the cataclysm of Noah's flood, and that mixed all those things together. And if that is the case, then you're saying that dinosaurs are not millions or billions of years old, but that had to been around during the time of this cataclysm. Is that?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Very interesting.
In fact, if that really proves the story of the flood is true, talk about it. Well, what about the ark? Could somebody build a building like that? Well, they had a long time. These men were superior to us, not only in brain power, but in physical power.
Right.
Yeah, in 100 years, you can build a lot. So
and they lived 1,000 years, or near
right.
Almost. So
that's right. Time we learn something, we all become senile. Right. That way with them. So, okay, you've got the boat. That's believable. What about all the animals on there? That's not hard if everything gets on as a juvenile, especially dinosaurs. Most dinosaurs hatch from the biggest dinosaurs we know about, hatch from eggs about the size of a stretched out basketball, an egg about a foot long, and they come out the size of a kitty cat. So being lizards, most of them, they wean at an early age. Therefore, they're ready to get on the ark when they're only a couple of feet tall. They've got the longest lifespan ahead of them. There's no mating. There's no fighting. They don't eat very much or do anything else much. They just sleep. So, okay, it's not hard to get all the animals of every kind on the ark. Well, then what about after the ark? How come we don't see dinosaurs today? Who says we don't see them today? I've got a couple of interviews with a friend of mine in a nearby town who lived in Crosbyton for a while, and he wanted to tell me about this thing he saw flying in the air. And what he saw, I said, well, can you draw that for me? He drew a pterodactyl. And it was not something he was trying to convince me of that he saw it. He was trying to convince me that, hey, it flew on down there in the canyon. It's down there. We could probably go find it. Okay? Did dinosaurs get on the ark? Yes. Did they get off the ark? Yes. Well, where are they now? Well, believe it or not, the earth ain't getting warmer. Maybe it warms up in a few spots here and there, melts all those glaciers and turns it back into farmland. That'd be nice. The earth has gotten the the tropical belt used to be pretty much worldwide, and it's shrunk down now to the tropics in Africa and the Amazon jungle. Well, nobody even knows what's in those places. Even the natives don't know what's in there totally. They're surprised every now and then by things. So you can't say, just because you can't see something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's like these PhD guys that can't see God. Well, I can't see your brain, pal. You got a brain, so shut up. Anyway, I have an interview with an Amazonian lady who's married to this red-headed white guy from Tennessee. They're missionaries. And she was telling me about, she was trying to get a book on dinosaurs. And I didn't really have anything she needed, but she said, well, my dad killed something and we want to show him, some pictures, have him pick out which one it was. Well, apparently he killed an allosaur or a T-Rex. And I think the color she said was black. It's in the Amazon jungle. He shot it accidentally when he was going to kill a pig. And as soon as the arrow let go, this T-Rex-like thing, whatever, reached out and grabbed the pig in its mouth, and the arrow hit the T-Rex or whatever it was, probably in its ear, went right into the brain, maybe the brain stem or something, and killed him.
Wow.
So the natives all started complaining. They came to this guy and said, man, why does the jungle smell so bad? So he told them, well, they went back there, and here's this big dead T-Rex looking thing laying there with a pig in his mouth. You can imagine the smell. So it was her uncle or the dad. He said he was out. There's this other big monster. It's got a fat body, a long neck, and a long tail, and it's also black, about 8 or 10 feet tall. He said, we make sure we never get within 100 feet of that thing. Well, why is that? They don't exist. They've been dead for 141 million years, give or take 4 or 5 days. Well, maybe yours are, but ours aren't, because he said when that thing makes a bark, some sort of a sound it can emit, and he said you're paralyzed for a few minutes or a little bit, and the thing comes over and grabs you.
Wow.
Oh, no, wait a minute. They've been extinct for millions of years, and besides that, they're herbivores, not carnivores. They wouldn't eat a person.
Uh-huh.
Well, I had some sheep one time. Those things, I would have thought they would never have even gotten near pork, especially spoiled pork. Some friends came and left some pork that went bad. I fed it to the cats. The sheep beat them to it. Okay, that's weird. So
That is weird.
So could an herbivore dinosaur eat a man? I'm not going to say no. Did you know horses will eat live chickens? Did you know that?
Oh, no. Wow.
This 2 people have told me. This one goes, yeah, we've got to keep I think it was an Arabian horses. We've got to keep them away from the chickens because they'll stomp them to death and eat them. Go, what?
Interesting.
So, all this stuff, we see T-Rexes with those big long teeth. We go, oh, they evolved those to eat meat. Well, not necessarily. There's this new fruit I saw over here at a grocery store the other day. It looks like something out of Jurassic Park. It's got like little pins all over it, kind of bumps, weird looking thing. And apparently it tastes real good, tastes like chicken, but it smells real bad. Well, what a perfect thing for a T-Rex to eat. 3 of those, he's full. So, the Bible says that God created everything to eat herbs.
Right.
Okay, why do a lot of things eat meat? Well, us too. We don't have carnivorous teeth.
Uh-huh.
We have vegetable teeth, but we eat meat, right?
Right.
Well, thanks to Adam's fall, and people don't believe this either, but the reason we have sin in the world, the reason there's death and all that stuff is because Adam disobeyed God. Yeah. And as the Bible says, in Adam we all die.
Uh-huh. Right.
Everybody's born dead. Unless you're born again, you're dead in trespasses and sins. And when that happened, apparently that went into the whole world, and certain animals like T-Rex, tigers, and other things started eating each other, eating meat. And then those teeth don't necessarily mean anything either, because there are camels, deer, and rhinoceros that have teeth like saber-toothed cats. And they just eat vegetables. They eat leaves. So Sharp teeth don't necessarily mean anything. That's a lot of stuff. The evolutionists who have had free reign with fossils for 150 years, some of it was they made stuff up because that's what it looked like. But so much based on assumptions. If they just stuck with the Bible, things would be much more easily explained.
Right, right. There's I believe it's the Book of Jubilees or Jasher in one of those texts, and also in the Aramaic Targum, it talks about how God sent the angels to lead the animals onto the ark, and that the animals were basically commanded, instructed to be docile while on the ark, and that they, did not even chase each other like for meal or anything like that. They just stayed calm and quiet, um, and allowed Noah to feed them and did their business. And then after, the ark settled, then they were released and roamed free. And so there was and also that the animals would led there by the angels. And so there was a supernatural hand to all of that as well. It's not, just we think Noah just randomly rounded up all of these creatures and put them into the ark. That's not the case at all. There was something more to it than that, and that kind of stuff is explained in other biblical manuscripts. But I wanted to also, and I'm not sure if you have heard about this, but I wanted to ask your opinion on it. That you were speaking about the pterodactyls, and there's in the Native American tradition, there's this creature called a piazza, and this piazza is just as you said. It's a uh, like a feathered reptile, like a plumed serpent almost. Sort of like Quetzalcoatl and even the Nakash of Genesis.
Mhm.
But anyways, they said that it was even cited as recent as the late 1800s, and that there are even current sightings of this particular creature around the world. And then one other thing I wanted to ask you. Oh, and also they traced a cave where they found, and they call it the Thunderbird also, in Native American lore. It's called the Thunderbird, but they traced it to this cave where they found all of these bones, and that this particular creature, picks up whatever cattle or, whatever different types of creatures and takes it back to its cave. And it was found to have lived there. And people can find this in a book called The Sky People, where the Native Americans talk about the connections with the fallen angels to the Sky People, and they talk about this Thunderbird in that book as well. But wanted to ask you also one other thing, and it has to do with recent sightings of giants. And I don't know if you heard, but they said that in Afghanistan that our special forces, a company of soldiers, had encountered a red-haired cannibal giant, and that he had killed some of the uh, some of the special forces before another group was sent in to subdue him. And there's um, reports of it having been carried out, and that it was really vile smelling, and but that this was a modern sighting of this, this kind of Nephilim giant hybrid creature. And then there's also in the Solomon Islands a book that was released by Maurice Bonyanin, and he talks about how the native people there, they even recently, as within the last couple decades, that some of the native peoples there were abducted by a group of giants that lived in the interior of the earth within these particular island chains there, the Solomon Islands. And that these sightings have also been recent, and that they believe that the giants are still alive up until this day. And so I wanted to ask your opinion on that, because we see even in the reports of, the conquistadors, just going back to the discovery of the Americas, or the rediscovery and the exploration.
The
uh,
European discovery.
yeah, the European discovery, that many conquistadors did encounter giants when they entered into these lands.
Yep. Yeah, that's Pigafetta, I think, was one of those that encountered those giants down there in Patagonia.
Right.
That Piazza, I haven't heard that word. Uh, speaking of Native American stories and all that, it really rankles me, not only personally, but as someone who wants to be a good scientist, that Native Americans' stories, if they don't fit in with, what the academic guys think should be, are discounted because these are some primitive Indians. They don't know anything. Okay, prove they're liars. There's what they're saying is, well, these Indians are making stuff up. Well, prove it.
Right.
And it's a lot of this stuff. Once you get to looking into it, which I'm sure you've done, well, sure, yeah, they were talking about something. It's a different name than you would have thought, but there it is. This the flying reptile with feathers. I haven't heard. I know there's a belief in feathered reptiles. I haven't heard anyone talk about that I know. But there was a guy here that saw one, and he says that it was just furry. Okay. I talked to a little girl from Mexico down there in the mountains somewhere. She was talking about one of her girlfriends had two little sisters. I think they were 7 and 12. These are small little girls, not very big. They went out to the bathroom at dusk one day. They said this big bird or something tried to swoop down and get them, probably the small one. And they were terrified. And I said, well, did it have feathers? Oh, no feathers. I said, well, did it have fur? She didn't know what fur was. So maybe there's three of these things. Maybe there's a feathered reptile. Maybe there's a furry pterodactyl type. And the big, what they call it, the thunderbird.
Right.
I've read some stories where you probably read the same story. These thunderbirds would come down and they'd grab baby buffalo and take them back and eat them.
Right.
They got to capturing little Indian kids. So we got to put a stop to this. So one night they said, don't go up on this mountain. Well, all these big birds were up there and a lightning storm happened and killed them. So they went up and there they were. And now the story I heard about that was that they came in ahead of thunderstorms. So they're called, thunderbirds. Well, down here in Texas, I observed one time, I was down in the canyon, and this August storm started blowing in from the north. Here comes all the vultures, way ahead of it, lit in their home camp and just waited the storm out. So, okay, well, that sounds like what they're saying. Here comes a storm. In front of there, these big birds, these big feathered birds, like the one they found down in Argentina, I think, or Argentina or something. So, there are several different kinds of cats. Why aren't there several different kinds of flying animals that are supposed to be extinct or non-existent? I think that's exactly what these guys are saying.
Yeah, I think so as well. And also just recently, and we're about to go to break, but the Peruvian army, they had fielded reports from villagers of attacks by this huge bat-like creature. And there's actually photos of them having shot this creature, and it had a 14-foot wingspan, and it looked like a giant vampire bat. I mean, it's really crazy. People can, Google that, and I'm sure that the image will come up, but it shows that there are strange anomalous type creatures out there that people don't consider to exist, and these things are reality, and they do go bump in the night. And so, but we'll be right back, everyone. We're at the first break, and then we'll pick up the stories. And all right, welcome back, everybody. Wanted to turn this back over to you, Joe, and wanted to get you to comment a little bit further about the giants, and if you would, because I believe a lot of people recognize you from the image that you have of the giant thigh bone, and I believe that that is part of your collection and in your museum. And so, can you elaborate on that as well?
Yeah, that's me with a white beard and the funky hat standing there in front of that big leg bone and the drawing of the skeleton. How that happened was about, oh gosh, 20 some years ago. A professor down in Florida sent me this article about these giants that were dug up over in 3 countries in the Middle East, Homs, Ur, and Zora, and the Euphrates Valley. And he said, would you do me a sculpture that size? I want to show my students how big it was. So I did. And then I made myself a cast and blew up a skeleton, a drawing of a skeleton to fit it. And that leg bone is 47.5 inches long, the femur. And the man that fit, the bottom of his rib cage would come to about 8.5 feet. That's a big guy.
Wow, that is huge.
So it is just a sculpture, but it's based on a human femur, sculpted by, on a human femur. And it was dug up in the 50s, as best we could figure, like maybe mid-50s. Road construction crews were bulldozing these mounds, these hills, which turned out to be burial mounds with these giant skeletons in them in 3 different places. Well, it's dry over there. Those bones are kind of crumbly. These are construction guys, so they grab the swords, the gold, the whatever, the jawbone, maybe the skull, it all falls apart, and they measure some stuff and go on. Maybe the antiquities are called, maybe they're not, department. But, this is a frequent occurrence. Today, at least in America, if you find a skeleton, boy, most people are scared to death to do anything with it, especially a giant skeleton. A friend of mine owns a property with a mound on it. He, for some reason, was digging into it or hit it or something, saw these bones, and there were the bones of a giant, at least 9 feet tall. Made the mistake of calling university. University came in and said, okay, that's a giant. It's 6.5 feet tall, and do not dig there anymore or go to jail. 6.5 feet tall, man, that's really scary. That scared Goliath, 6.5 feet tall. So that's, back when all these giants are being dug up into really the 60s, before universities were able to, as soon as they heard about something, a news story, send a guy out, from the Smithsonian, collect those bones for scientific research, I'm doing quotes here, and never see them again. In fact, there was a cowboy not too far, about 40 miles south of here, wanted to tell me his story. So I went down and interviewed him and taped his story. He said when he was in high school, he discovered the bones of a giant man down south of here in the red beds. And he went to Texas Tech. They brought over a professor who happened to be a Native American. They excavated this thing, and it was a 12-foot tall man with a 3-foot tall man buried with it. Not a kid, but a man.
Wow.
Okay. This is a real problem for evolutionists because you can't have little guys 3 feet tall that are regular people or people that are 12 feet tall that are not acromagliacs. So they didn't know better, but they displayed it over here in the museum. And I think I actually saw it when I was a kid through a school trip. Sometime, I believe in 1960, the case was vandalized and the bones disappeared. Wouldn't you know it?
Of course.
So that professor's probably long gone. And so is the cowboy. He's probably now 75 or 80. But this is over and over. There was a man 12 feet tall over here on the edge of Texas and New Mexico, west of us. And so I thought, well, I'll go with those newspaper over there. There surely should be a story. A 12-foot tall man, 1930, 35. Went over there and I told this guy, the editor, about it. He said, "Oh man," he said, "there was somebody in here just accidentally burned all of our archives up into the 40s."
Oh my goodness! Yeah,
Thought he
accidentally.
was doing us a favor getting rid of all these old newspapers. So story in there, it's long gone. And that's that giant you're talking about over there. I believe that's in Kandahar.
Kandahar, yes.
L.A. Marzulli interviewed that guy, I'm pretty sure.
Right.
And looks to me like the whole thing is true. And
exactly.
If there's one, there's probably more.
Right.
And why do they always have red hair?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's my Irish and Scotch ancestors were bad people. Well, just because you're big and tall doesn't make you bad. I know a lot of guys that are real tall. They're nice people, But when you get up to be 12, 15, 18 feet tall, that's not, I just don't think you can say, oh, that's just good diet. That's something
right.
else. That begs the question of, well, are they Nephilim?
Right.
Probably, yeah.
And both you and I, being believers, we know that the Bible speaks about this race of giants coming into being from the fallen angels intermating with the daughters of man. Genesis 6, we see that there is the link for the origin, and that we have further elaboration of this whole story in the book of Enoch, and that 2 Peter and Jude, they also make mention of these angels going after strange flesh. And so these stories that we're talking about now are confirmation. And I think that one of the reasons why the Smithsonian and others, as far as disappearing a lot of this evidence and hiding this knowledge from the public, that it's contrary to evolution and the whole Darwinian lie that they are promoting and raising, indoctrinating kids through the educational system. And as you said, with these Hobbit people as well, that also there's been races and bones and skeletons of these people found worldwide as well, and existing at the same time as giants and other anomalous beings. And so all of this is contrary to evolution and the whole belief that we slowly evolved and progressed over time, one being into another, and that we evolved somehow of apes, even though there are still apes here with us now, which doesn't make sense. But
they're smarter than we are. Come on, they don't have to go to school. They don't have to wear clothes. They don't care about fashion. They don't have to get married. They can't get divorced. They don't have car wrecks. They don't get tickets. They don't go to hell when they die.
I hear you, brother.
They're smart.
Yeah, I agree.
Those little people, I didn't want to cut you off there.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
Remember the story here a few years ago about the little people found down there on Los Flores Islands?
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Oh, it's just, how do we understand this? Well, they did depictions of them. And as always, they get a lying artist in there like myself, we need it to look a little like an ape. Well, how do you know it looked like an ape? Well, we need to look like an ape because we can't have little people like that, really fully human.
Right.
It's just, when I was working on an allosaur site out there actually I was looking for one and found 3 of them on the western slopes out near Rangeley and Dinosaur, Colorado. I went into the little town of Dinosaur there and bought a book called Blue Mountain Friends. There's a history of the Blue Mountain out there from the Indian days, is when the white man got there, and through the kind of the pioneer history. It's a lot of really cool, interesting stuff. Well, here's this little story And it's about these two little girls that are like maybe 8 or 9 years old. One's a little white girl, one's an Indian girl. And they, relating a conversation they had that day. And one of them says, well, what are we going to do? So the white girl says, I know, let's go up on that hill or mesa or something up there and look for arrowheads. The little Indian girl says, oh no, why not? Because the Pictou might get us. The Pict. You ever heard of the Picts over in Scotland? The Picts.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Pictou, the Pictou. And, well, that's just, kids don't, they don't know anything.
Uh-huh.
Well, here a while back, well, actually quite a few years ago now, these two truckers, again, not guys that write little cute novels, but these guys, they wanted to talk to me. So I went to see them up in Colorado. They said, man, we was in this box canyon, and this little thing, this person was about 7 inches tall. And you go, oh boy, can't be true. He says, no, we followed it, went into a box canyon, then it disappeared. I go, well, okay. Sometimes things appear to disappear when they really don't. They just go behind something, fall into rock, and you can't see it. But anyway, that's what they told me. So another dig we were on out there in Colorado near Macedonia, some NASA scientists came out. Some really kind of low-key guys, but, big brains and all that stuff. This lady came with them who was Native American, can't remember which tribe, but she was part Italian, but she looked Indian, a beautiful lady. And so after a few days, we got acquainted. I said, have you ever heard of the little people? Oh, yeah. She said, well, yeah. Said, we throw our clothes out in the back for the little people. And people think we're just trashy, but we're throwing them out for the little people. Okay? Now, here's a lady that's with NASA. She's not making stuff up. She's not a nut. And whether you believe that or not, she certainly believed in the little people.
Mm-hmm.
So, everywhere I've looked, there's that same kind of story.
Right.
And, okay, it's like smoke. Please, if there's smoke, there's a fire somewhere.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. There's a text called the Cauldron Bible, and there's a particular chapter in it called the Scroll of Thothis, Thothis. And in this particular chapter, which it talks about the primordial times, going back to the time of Atlantis and when the fallen angels were ruling here upon the earth, and it talks about that there were, dwarves and little people and one-eyed giants and all kind of mentions of men that were covered fully in fur, like Bigfoot and things of that nature. It all described in this one particular story, and it makes me think of what we're talking about now, because it speaks of them as all existing and living in different parts of the world, and that even these islands were, some of the islands were known as where the Cyclops lived, or where the little people, the dwarvish people lived. And so all of these kind of things are preserved in the legends and oral traditions of Native peoples worldwide. We have even here in like near Nevada, Lovelock Cave, the Paiute Indians. There was the legend of their being at war with the red hair, again the cannibal giants, and they spoke about having cornered them and backed them all up into that cave, and then they built a large fire and smoked them all out, and none of them escaped. And then the scientists, I guess 100 years later, or I'm not exactly sure, but people went in there to collect the bat guano, and they even created a company to do that. And then, having removed the bat guano, which was really profitable for them, they then began to discover remnants of that culture. And there were, what I think, like 70 skeletons of these giants, men and women and even children, all they had all expired together. And there was duck decoys and all of these other artifacts that were found with them in that particular cave. And there were a lot of these skeletons found and preserved in like the Humboldt Museum, and but a lot of that also disappeared.
Sure, yeah.
Can you speak on that?
Yeah, I've been out to Lovelock Cave twice, and first time we went out, we recorded the fact there was this what appeared to be a giant handprint about 14 inches long of a five-fingered person. Looked like he slapped the wall with black paint or something like that. We had a little dab of that residue that whatever analyzed, and the lab said it was some sort of berry juice and proto-nylon. What? Anyway.
Proto-nylon. Wow.
Yeah, I have no idea what that means. Well, we know the story pretty good. We went into town and to the some sort of place where the Pi got together for meetings and things like that. We spoke to Sarah Winnemucca's, one of her great grand descendants, a young woman.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and of course she knows all the story. And it's just like you said, there was these wicked giants with long red or blonde hair, and they were cannibals. They were terrible. The Paiutes tried to make peace with them, tried to bring them into their tribe. They just said terrible things, and finally they said, look, if you aren't going to act like people, then we're going to kill you.
Uh-huh.
So they filled that cave full of brush, and apparently the giants pulled it in on them, and they just kept pulling it in until they suffocated the whole bunch. So we asked this, went up there. If you go up to Winnemucca to that Lovelock Cave, they filled all the chambers where these people probably were, these giants. They filled it with dirt. So you can't do anything, but there's this one big room in there. And
wow.
The seating's all blackened. And they got a platform out there for you to stand on. But outside, there's a plaque that tells you all about the Paiute Indians, and they lived here, and this is their duck decoys and all this stuff. All Paiute Indians.
Uh-huh.
So we asked this young lady there. She says, that wasn't our cave. We didn't use that cave. Oh, maybe you ought to tell the BLM to go put the right story up there. That cave is inhabited by evil red-headed giants.
Right.
I don't think you're going to do that. But, like she said, we didn't use that cave. Well, then where'd all that stuff come from? Well, it wasn't theirs.
Uh-huh.
There's also, we talked to a guy, I won't tell you where, but we happened to run into him. And I forget how he came up. This guy was 50s, big guy, worked there locally. And he sort of looked around every direction. He says, I helped rebury a 9-footer out here, sent back to the Smithsonian, or whoever sent it back. And he couldn't tell us much more, and that's all he wanted to say, but he reinterred one of those giants.
Wow.
Yeah. But they don't exist, so
yeah, right.
Indians making up stories like that, you can't trust them.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, we have the native traditions and the stories of these red-haired cannibal giants, but then the guy Jim Vieira, he and his brother, they did a book where they went through all the digital renditions of a lot of these old newspapers and searching their databases, and they came up with several hundred reports of giants being discovered and found in, like you said, the ancient burial mounds that used to be all over this country.
All over.
And then we even have in a speech that Abraham Lincoln gave, he makes mention of the giants that had lived here before the indigenous peoples. And so these kind of things, are part of the historical record. And if people really open themselves to this kind of research, these kind of discoveries can be made. and skulls, even with horns, being discovered in places like Pennsylvania
Yep.
and other places. So these kind of discoveries were found even here in America. Numerous uh, evidence as far as skeletons and things of that nature. But can you comment on that as well?
Well, in my, I published a book in 2012 called Giants Against Evolution. Half the book is on all these accounts all over the world showing there were giant men. These are not 7-footers, or most of them aren't 8-footers. They're bigger than that.
Uh-huh.
They fit the story of the Nephilim. They were mostly evil. They were Satanists, cannibals, homosexuals, all this stuff.
Right.
None of them weren't choir boys. Only a couple of instances that I came across in ancient stories or old stories. One of the accounts by the natives in Florida or somewhere talked about some of the giants had black hair and black beards, and some were red.
Uh-huh.
And some of the giants were nice. I think the ones with black hair were nice. But that's relative. I mean, I don't know what that means. They just didn't try to kill them, I guess.
Right.
Another account said, I think this was among the Cherokee or somewhere down there in the South, that the Native American men liked to marry the giant women because they were so beautiful.
Interesting.
Yeah, right. I mean, I guess they didn't mind being bossed around, but anyhow.
Right.
But that means so those giant women down there must have been some of the nicer people.
Uh-huh.
Now, if you're 8 feet tall, that's just barely a giant.
Right.
So there could be normal people, just a good, healthy, tall people. Maybe that's who they're talking about. It really all the mean ones you don't get. The giants that are like the Ojibwa and the Paiutes had to deal with, and other native tribes. Those were all bad individuals. They didn't say anything good about those. So why is it that most of the accounts by Native Americans of these giants, but they were bad? Well, that harkens back to the Nephilim. The Nephilim were nice.
Right.
Okay, so there's a connection there. Why isn't that evidence?
Right. And also, even the Book of Enoch speaks about, because they were strong and they were heroes, like the men of renown, they were haughty and proud, and they believed themselves, to be superior to mankind. And they often not only slaughtered, but abducted and feasted and took wives of, again, of all which they chose. And so they would mistreat humans because of their superior size. And so, and these kind of stories are passed down in tradition. And as far as what we see with the red hair cannibal giants and their abduction of people, even Stephen Quell, he wrote the book on True Legends. And in that book, he makes mention of a lot of the myths and the oral traditions of the native people, of the kind of evil that they would even abduct and then cut the flesh off of living individuals and roast it and then eat it in front of them, and do this until the person died. I mean, that's the kind of abomination that they were involved in.
Yeah, that is. Well, that brings up an interesting thing of the arrogance of the giants.
Right.
Why would the royalty of Europe, and at least some of them, they've never told me personally, but why would they claim to be divine, the divine right of kings? You've heard that, right?
Yes.
The divine right of kings. Now, I'm not sure that's just European. That may be Oriental, African.
It's worldwide, yeah.
Okay, well, maybe that's because they were part divine. Like Gilgamesh said, he was part divine because his father was an angel.
Exactly, right.
Okay, so there again, there's something which persists to this day, What's the answer? Well, it looks like the Nephilim.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, the Habsburgs of Europe claim kin or descendancy from the Anakin, I think.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Uh,
the Sons of Anak.
yeah, why that if it isn't true? I mean, why make that up? So
Right.
there again, everywhere you look, people say, well, there's no evidence of giants. Well, I don't know. I think there is.
Right. I think there's overwhelming evidence of giants and these bloodlines and their connections to the Nephilim, and certainly they celebrate these connections amongst themselves, the elites and these bloodlines. But we'll be right back for second hour, everyone. Welcome back for second hour. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed here on Truth Frequency Radio, and I'm honored to have as guest with me Joe Taylor. Joe, wanted to give you a chance to comment on what I was speaking about before we went to break, just about the giants and the sons of God, these heroes of old. Also, the connections with the bloodlines, because certainly the elites celebrate and believe that they are of this otherworldly race of these hybrid entities, and the whole connection again with the Genesis 6, the sons of God taking wives of the daughters of man and creating this race of giants. That this is, even when Israel went into Canaan, that they encountered these sons of Anak and spoke about how they were grasshoppers in their sight.
Well, there again, we live in an Occidental world. The Western world over here doesn't generally like miracles or anything that's, you can't explain physically. So the idea that an angel, a spirit or a spiritual being, could marry a human woman and have children is, man, there's a lot of people, especially Christians, they can't go that. They just
Right.
can't have that at all. And part of that's we don't believe in miracles over here unless you're Pentecostal maybe or something. But most people, they don't think like that. The other thing is in Matthew where it says that the Pharisees were accosting Christ, and this woman had 7 husbands, and which one is she going to be with in heaven? And Jesus rebuked them. They were just trying to trip him up. He says, you don't even know what you're talking about. Nobody's married in heaven.
Uh-huh.
They'll be like the angels of God that are married. All right. Well, some people say that's because they didn't have any women up there, no women angels. Okay. But they immediately make the assumption, and I'm guilty of this myself a long time ago. I thought, well, okay, then angels can't marry. But I never gave the thought to it, didn't have to, 40 years ago. So I've tried to say this many times. It doesn't say they can't marry and reproduce and have children. It just says they don't in heaven.
Right.
If you take them out of heaven, their first estate, and put them on earth, there's nothing says they can't marry women. And that's what the Bible says. Genesis clearly says that the sons of Elohim married women, the daughters of Adam.
Right.
Daughters of Adam could be Seth's daughters or Cain's daughters. It doesn't matter. They're the daughters of Adam. They're just human women. And the Elohim, his sons, those are the angels. It can't be anything else. But man, people just go berserk sometimes. Some of my friends cannot have that. And I don't try to beat them up. I just say that's what the Bible says. And I've been studying this now thoroughly, for about 15, 20 years, actually longer than that. And everything I see points to the fact that these things have been right in front of our face all these years. The giant, the heroes of old, the Olympics, the Olympiads and all that. You go anywhere in the world, you find these stories of these heroes, and they're basically all, I think, talking about the fallen angels and the Nephilim sons. Otherwise, you got to say everybody just made this stuff up.
Right.
And again, prove that people make stuff up. Shakespeare did. He's a writer. You know, I could make stuff up. You could make stuff up and write a book about nothing ever happened, but that's not history. That's not what they're telling us. They're accounting of things and people and beings that existed. And they're telling us what they look like. You know, if you've seen Greek friezes where they show men with wings,
Right.
you know, taking women.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yes.
if you go to Peru over there, some of those fabrics over there, they show winged men, bird men, and
Uh-huh.
oh, maybe they're all Mothmen. I don't know, but oh, well, angels have wings. Apparently, angels do have wings. I don't know if all of them do. And didn't you get into this? No, I don't want to divert here, but just to show you, the Bible is not some little book of poetry and feel good stuff. It's a book of some heavy history and some really, really serious things. Like over there where it talks about the women with wings that
Mm-hmm.
that flew up in the air. Uh, I don't know. I've never seen a woman with it wings,
Right.
but it says they had them. They're like stork wings. Well,
Uh-huh.
it's like feathers. So is that true or not? Yeah, the Bible says it is. It doesn't say they were like women with wings. It says they're women with wings.
Right. It speaks about the lion men of Moab. Yeah.
Like, of which there are sculptures.
Yes.
You know, they're they get to the whole thing of the griffin. You know, the
Right.
griffin shows up everywhere. So, you know, are they just making it up, or is that a real being? Well, why don't we have bones? Well, you don't have bones of everything, and how do you know there aren't bones?
Right.
You know, how do you know there isn't one of them in a cage somewhere? People make the assumption that, well, if I didn't see it, it doesn't exist. Well, that's just, you don't have to assume that. That's just assuming too much. And so, how could those things possibly come into being? Well, one, God could have created them, or two, the angels could have mated with an animal, and that animal mated with something else, and end up with
Right.
some hybrid that continues on, like the quarter horse. You know, now
Yes.
the quarter horse is a stable breed, and before there really wasn't such thing as a quarter horse back before 20s to 30s. So why would it persist if it wasn't true? And you know, we're Occidentals over here. We just don't think, well, like the American Indian, they're Orientals. They're used to be. They think in terms of poetry, like my heart sailed like an eagle. Oh, your heart isn't an eagle. Well, he didn't say that. He said his heart soared like an eagle, idiot. Can't you understand poetry? You know what I mean? We don't think in terms of, it's just all got to be one, two, three, and hard, cold stuff. Well, you know, that there's more to life than just hard, cold stuff.
Right. Yeah. Berosus, in the the account by Alexander Polyhistor, he speaks about how before the flood that the angels involving themselves with in the Book of Giants, also in the Dead Sea Scrolls, speaks about the miscegenation, that the angels corrupted everything, humanity, the animals, and even plants, that they were cross-breeding and involving themselves in different manner with everything, so that all flesh became corrupted. And it talks about how there were, these uh, um, winged humans, and also the hippocentaurs, the half horse and
Right.
half man, and also the fish, and part serpentine, like Cecrops, the founder of Athens, that he was a human from above, but reptilian or serpent-like below,
Mm-hmm.
much like we see Medusa and the Gorgons, that they also, took on that kind of form. And so they were all kind of weird, anomalous, and hybrid creatures prior to the flood of Noah's day. And I think that one of the reasons why God brought on the flood was to, wipe out these hybrids, and that they were being abominations, and also the children of the Nephilim, the fallen angels, they were warring against humanity and cannibalizing and making life, contentious. And so, bringing on the flood, he restored everything, and then told Noah and family to go forth and multiply and replenish the earth. And so, something to all that for sure.
That's right.
Well, I wanted to give you a chance to also speak about the Mothman, which is an incredibly interesting account, and something that I saw the Mothman prophecies a long time ago, and how people were encountering this winged being that had these red glowing eyes. And you said that in your part of the country, your part of the world, that there are actual experiences and encounters with this particular being. And so, can you elaborate on that as well? And also, what you think of, because are these creatures also tied in similarity to the Nephilim and the hybridization of, creatures and beings?
There have been 5 people that I know of in Crosbyton, where I live, a little bitty old town here in Nowheresville. 5 people have seen this Mothman thing. 3 women and 2 men that I know of. One woman was sitting out on the highway over here. It's actually a farm route 651, which runs right by my museum, north and south. It's only 62 miles long, and then it stops. And on that road, there's been all this stuff happen. UFOs, weird things in the sky, and this Mothman. So this lady is out there smoking a cigarette one night, about to go to bed, 11 o'clock. She senses something above her, or hears something, looks up, and oh my Lord, here's this weird looking thing flying, hovering above her, with a face she describes as being really horrible, like Jeepers Creepers in the movie, I guess. So she's terrified. About 4 o'clock in the morning, one of her friends is driving by her house out to the gin out in the country to take her husband something to eat, doing about 40 miles an hour, and bam, she hits something right on the edge of town, dents her fender, bumps her head, and this thing goes flying into the ditch, slides across it, left a mark where he slid. A 16-wheeler saw the whole thing happen. He stopped, told her to get back in the car. That thing's not human. And he said, I see him out here this time of night. I'm going, I've never seen one. I live here. Anyway, she goes over and she's a brave gal. She touches the thing laying on the ground. He gets up and flutters his wings and then just flies up above her, flies in a circle around them, and then flies off.
Crazy.
Yeah. Not like a bird hovering or a butterfly. It defies description as a flying creature, because it doesn't appear to flap its wings like you think it would. Mm-hmm. The same lady, this was maybe in the last 10 years, last November, right after my conference, she was driving down through Blanco Canyon, which is not far from where I grew up. It's just a ranch down there, and I think she went over a little creek or dry creek, and all of a sudden, bam, hits something. And she stops, gets out, and hears this creature. And this time she says, what do you want? Who are you? What are you?
Wow.
And he flies away.
Yeah, I believe these kind of sightings have been happening in many different spaces and places across the country. And so, do you think that there are multiple types, and that this is maybe a race, even though if it is hybrid, maybe they're not able to reproduce, or that this is a spiritual entity, fallen angelic, but present in body, that it even says of Satan that he can present himself as an angel of light, and so
Right.
yeah. So what do you think about these particular beings? And
Well, the three times this one lady has seen it, she describes the wings more like rags. That's kind of like a moth. A moth that's beat its wings up, maybe. uh, it can only be so many things. One, it could be a bird, a species we don't know anything about. Could be a demonic manifestation. Could be an angel. Could be an angel of God. Maybe it's one of God's angels. We don't know what all He's created. Uh, or could be a hybrid. As far as I'm concerned, that ought to be looked at. Could it be a mix of these angels who could fly and or some sort of a bird? I don't know. We're trying to find out more about them. I know there's other places that are having Mothman meetings and things like that. I don't know much about them, except to know that they have the same frightening reaction. And this lady hit one twice, did it her car, bumped her head, and not far from here, in a little place called Sundown, Texas, a friend of mine went over and interviewed one of the guys that was chased by one of them over there. This is maybe 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And they were driving, they were in the back of a pickup trying to get away from it. It was flying behind them. They were going as fast as that pickup would run, which is maybe 80 miles an hour or so. And this thing was clawing at the back of the tailgate of the pickup. Now, can a demon claw at things? Can a demon be hit and knocked down and bend a fender? I don't know. Maybe demons are strange things, but
right.
bodies can do that. There's a case of a guy over here in one of our little towns. Big guy. I guess he was on one of those drugs that drives you crazy. Was it PCP or something like that?
Uh-huh.
Anyway, he was coming after this guy in his house, and he shot him 5 times with a gun, and the guy just kept coming.
Right.
So, is it possible for beings? It's possible for man. There are people who have been hit by cars in the war. You get blown up, and these soldiers keep on fighting, and then as soon as they get to a safe place, they collapse and, nearly die. But for a moment, they can keep their activities up in spite of their injuries. So is that what's happening to this Mothman that gets hit? Why would he get hit? Why would he stand there in front of a car coming?
Mm-hmm.
The deers do that. So there's a lot we don't know, and I'm trying not to make any rash judgments, and I'm trying to encourage everybody else. Don't just say it's this or that. Say it could be this or that, and let's find out. Let's do some real research on this thing.
Right.
But
yeah, absolutely.
there again, it harkens back to, are there really hybrids? Well, the Book of Giants and Jasher and all those are talking about that. You have to call those things lies, because that's what they're talking about. And who says they're a lie? They're not accepted canon, at least in our Bible, but that doesn't make them untrue. So
Right.
It's a strange phenomenon. And why is it becoming more pronounced? I don't know. I never heard of these things when I grew up here. Maybe they did happen. Maybe somebody saw them. Because out there on the ranches and the farms, people back then you didn't use a telephone very much. And nobody usually had a camera with them. So a lot of these things could be seen and you just forget about it. I know a lady, one of my cousins, saw a UFO right out just a mile from our farm, came down, she and her mom were driving down the road at night. This light comes at them and then boom, up over their car. And I recounted that to her here a while back. She said, I had forgotten all about that. Well, it's a pretty heavy thing to forget, but we do,
Right.
So, maybe with my Project 651, if I start publishing that locally, maybe more of these farmers and cowboys will come out and go, yeah, my dad, this, or I saw something. And the more you know, the closer you get to the truth. That's what we're trying to do.
Well, certainly there are a lot of things that are unexplained and that are alluded to within the biblical texts.
Hmm.
And understanding that the Bible is prophetic, in my opinion, shows that these kind of things that are spoken about that are anomalous and that are hard to believe by modern humanity and modern researchers, that there is evidence for their existence within the world. And certainly native peoples worldwide speak about and cover and share stories. And even, regular people now, like the lady you're talking about, they speak about encounters, with these particular beings. And even in this day and age, like the stories of the Kandahar giant and the Solomon Island giants. And so we really have to reconsider all of the, as we made mention, the conquistadors. They spoke about and have chronicled in their journals of their encounters with these giants, um, and that often they were the leaders, the rulers of native peoples in different parts of the country, even Patagonia, meaning Bigfoot. Which, when we come back from break, um, that's what I'd like to speak about as well. Bigfoot and this particular being, which, again, this encounters with this creature in different forms. Some, say white fur, some say brown, some say red. But worldwide, there are encounters with this particular creature. And then in the Sumerian traditions, it speaks about when they first came, the fallen angels, when they were first banished here and came to this world, that the Bigfoot that was the hominid, the type of being that was here present upon the earth in their stories, and they attempted to make a slave race of these particular beings. But anyways, we'll go into that when we come back from break. We're 3 minutes out, Joe, and so if you would, can you give out your website and your contact information, and also where your museum is? And you said that it's in repairs now, but when people can find out more about when to come and visit and support you in your work there.
Okay, the website is mountblanco.com, MTBLANCO. You should properly say Mont Blanco, but if you say Blanco, you say Monte. So we say Mount Blanco. But it's mountblanco.com. And the email is mountblanco1@aol.com. I also have an art site, which I haven't done really much with. I've just got it up. It's called JoeTaylorArtAndMusic.com. And on there are just all of my various paintings and artwork over the years. I decided to just put out there, and if anybody wants a print of them, they'll be available. So that's there too. That's one of my occupations. That's my main occupation, has been an artist, which has opened the doors to in paleontology and sculpting and digging. It helps to be an artist if you want to be a good digger. So that's I've also done a lot of illustration. If I write a book, I take a lot of photographs and do illustrations. So that helped in actually fooling people, because I put out a newspaper one time, and it was just me doing all the artwork and the photography. And I went to a little printer over here, and everybody thought I had a big staff, and an art deal and all that. It was just me writing everything, taking all the pictures and get it printed. So it made people think I was more than I was, but it's just because I'm a graphic artist. So my museum is in Crosbyton, Texas, like Bing Crosby, Crosbyton. We're about 32 miles east of Lubbock, Texas, and about 30 minutes from the international airport. It's just a little cow town and a farm town, but we're right on the edge of the canyon. When you drop off the canyon, you start going through the human layer, where you find the human skeletons and wolf, coyote, some horses, buffalo. Then you go down into the mammoths, mastodons, and all that stuff. You finally get down to the red beds and the hard brown sandstone, where you have all the crocodilians, the giant crocodiles, 25, 40 feet long, giant salamanders, 10, 12 feet long.
Wow.
So that's where I've done a lot of my works down there. And also in buffalo, I've collected a lot of buffalo bones. I love buffalo bones. So well, we're right out here on the edge of the, I call it, this is where the abatement of Noah's flood stopped. It's just a few miles from town, because if you've ever been around a farm that's on a slope, you'll notice when it rains, it cuts little grand canyons at the bottom of the field. And where the water stops, that's where the little canyon stops, okay? That's what you see at Crosbyton out here. And it eroded all the way to the coast, up to here. And then the water ran back in the ocean and left us with the plains up here. And that's how you find all fossils anyway, pretty much, except the ones that are buried in volcanic ash after the flood. And I've worked on a lot of that stuff too. In fact, we have a layer here of white dirt, white clay. And you find the same stuff everywhere. You find white dirt and white clay, you find the same three-toed horse, giant animals, and so on.
All right, we'll be right back for final segment. All right, welcome back, everybody, for final segment. We're going to be talking about the Bigfoot, Yeti, Sasquatch, many different names depending on where you are in the world. But certainly, again, like with the giants, there's worldwide sightings and multiple accounts and ancient legends surrounding the existence of this being as well. And so, Joe, in your research, what do you believe with regard to these particular beings? And have you had, anybody near you with personal sighting? Is this something that also exists where you live?
Yes, there was a deacon in our church here. He was a very conservative person, just a regular guy, never made up a story in his entire life. He drove a delivery truck. He was coming towards Crosbyton, south through Blanco Canyon on 651, and as he pulled up out of the canyon up the slope there, getting out, he had to gear down, and he got down pretty slow. And as he gets to the top, he hears something whack the truck, and he thinks he's blown out a tire. He doesn't know what, so he stops. He goes around, looks. There's nothing wrong with the truck. There's no tires. Okay. Gets back in, and all of a sudden, the truck begins to bounce up and down, or rock back and forth. And so he gets it in gear and takes off. And he looked in the rearview mirror, and he said it looked like an 8-foot tall ape jumping up and down with his arms in the air.
Huh.
Okay. So there have been other accounts, like I may have already said, but there was a friend of mine shot one, a white one, or a shimmering one.
Wow.
And I said, well, how do you know he didn't die? He said, well, they didn't know. They took off. They shot it a bunch of times. And like I said, humans can sustain several bullets and not die right then. So is it possible for one of these things, which maybe has a whole different musculature than we do, that's tougher? Anyway, he took me out to the site where he saw this thing, and here's a grove of trees, and they're about 3 inches across. And I noticed, as we're standing around the edge of the grove, a bunch of these trees have been pushed down at the base. They've been bent over, and some of them had been there quite a while, long enough to kind of die. But one was still fairly alive, and it had been bent over. You'd have to have some real power to do that, and they don't drive trucks, and there's no vehicles in there. Cattle won't do that. So it was a little bit creepy, like, gosh, that grove right there could be housing who knows what's in there. In fact, this cowboy who had been injured, he says that you're going to have to take care of me if that thing comes out here. But yeah, my bad knee will limp along here. So what disturbs me, I was just recently up in, we went to an excursion to Death Valley with Don Monroe, M.K. Davis, Ron Moorhead, and Daniel Jones came along. We didn't get to go where we wanted to go because things didn't work out, but it'd have been an awful trip, and probably a good thing we didn't. But we went to some other places real remote, and they went on up into the sort of the mountains there, and I stayed down below because I got a bad knee. And I look around, here's a branch laying on the ground. I go, how'd that branch get here? There's no trees around here. It has just been pulled off not long ago. And I go, okay, that's what they allege you to do, is tear off limbs and stuff.
Uh-huh.
So Ron Moorhead's there. He told me that he, as well as his daughter, both saw a Bigfoot manifest out of nothing into their view.
Wow.
Okay, and I can't call him a liar. I wasn't there. But that raises some serious problems. Ron says, well, maybe they go into a portal. I go, what the heck's a portal? You know, angels can come and go. Demons can come and go. You know, you have a demon inside of it, you can't see it. See its manifestation, but you don't see it necessarily. So I don't know. That's been a real puzzle with me, that they can appear and disappear. One explanation is that if you're within maybe 100 feet of them, they see you and there's nothing behind them, that they can emit some kind of a frequency which puts you to sleep temporarily. This is Dr. Jeff Meldrum was telling this thing, and they just walk away while you're temporarily out of it for 4 or 5 seconds. They just walk away and they have a long stride. So when you open your eyes, look out there, they have disappeared. Maybe it's the same thing if they put you to sleep. They see you, they hum this hum or whatever it is. You go to sleep temporarily. They walk over, and now when you wake up, they're in your sight. I didn't tell that to Ron, but perhaps that's worth looking into. Otherwise, it sounds to me like you've got a spiritual being. If they can come and go like that and be invisible, I don't see how that could be an ape or an animal or a hybrid. I don't know. But I can tell you this, from all the people I've talked to, they apparently sometimes weep over their dead, the babies. They weep over the baby. They pull up trees, big trees. They'll stack them in together. Two of them are right side up, and the other one's upside down, 40 feet tall. Takes a strong person to do that. This one guy told me that he was out in, I believe, Arizona. I've got it on film. He said he saw this kind of little grove of trees over there. Went over there, and here's the whole hill is covered in bones, and he was kind of like creeped out by it. And I said, well, were like cow bones, deer bones? He said, well, yeah, maybe everything like that. So that's another friend of mine says they'll find these bone piles, and apparently it's Bigfoot. They kill a deer, they eat it, and I don't know, maybe they completely, like a cat can lick the bone clean. You know, a cat can lick a bone completely clean with a rough tongue. Some friends of mine up in Nebraska say they can put out peanut butter as long as you open the jar, the lid, so they get it off. They'll come in, and a few days later bring the peanut butter back empty with the lid on it.
Wow.
And this one lady, she's kind of into the fossil thing and has a little Bigfoot museum. Apparently, one of these things came by and left her a buffalo tooth or something on her the little walk of her or wall of her around her house. So it's like, well, you know, is that a little gift, a little thank you for the peanut butter?
Right on. Yeah, you just don't know, right?
You don't know. There's where did I hear this? Somebody said, they were up on a hill or something, and looked down on a group of them, and said finally one of them looked up at them and said, "You're not welcome here," or something like that.
Oh, wow. Mm.
Okay, now they can talk. A minor bird can talk. Cats seem to talk, but for someone to say words you can understand, that has a human or an angelic quality to it.
Right.
Which brings up, I suppose you know about what was his name, Zena, over there in Russia. was the child of a supposed Sasquatch and
No.
some.
Please
Well,
share.
okay, they captured this female, what they're thinking was a Sasquatch, and she did try to get away or tear the place up, but these Russian men took advantage of her. And she had, I think, 6 children. All of them died because she'd take them down to the river and wash them, and they'd freeze to death. They'd die of exposure.
Oh
So
wow.
so the last one, they kept the baby from her, didn't let her do that, and it grew into a man. Well, that man looks not unlike Abraham Lincoln. He's sort of an acromegaly, but he looks like a regular kind of bony faced guy with full features. And apparently they have his bones now. They buried him, and I think they dug him up. So my question is, well, okay, was that just a wild woman who had become covered in hair, or maybe that, just because you're covered in hair doesn't make you not a human,
Right.
or just because you don't have hair doesn't make you not a human. But there are men that don't have hardly any hair on their face, like Peruvians. Well, they're still men. So there's a great variety in the race of man. There's a great variety. Is it possible this was a wild woman that these guys took advantage of? She wasn't an ape or a Sasquatch at all. I've got a drawing in my museum that some people gave me, a forensic drawing. They were up in Oklahoma, Indiana. I should know better, but anyway, they saw this what appeared to be a wild man or a Bigfoot down at the creek digging out crawfish with a full-size deer thrown over his shoulder. And eventually he looked up and saw them and took off, ran down the middle of the creek or the river, crossed the sandbar with this thing on his back. So they had plaster with him, went there and plastered this track, one of his tracks. It's just a regular human footprint. Looks like a guy maybe 6-7 feet tall with a regular, not a Bigfoot, not a Sasquatch footprint, with the toes all the same size going across equally. It's like a human footprint. And they had a forensic artist. These guys were cops. They had a forensic artist draw what they saw. It looks like somebody you'd see on a football field today. He had a kind of a low brow, a low hairline. He had a beard, and he was sort of brown. But you can get brown if you're outside all the time. You'll end up being brown. And it looked to me, that don't look like Sasquatch. That looks like a human being. Well, then, are there men that just live out in the wild so long that they learn to eat raw meat, crawdads? They sleep in a bunch of leaves like an animal. Yeah, that's possible. And it doesn't mean they don't have a soul. It doesn't mean they're not a human being. But and maybe they get covered in hair. So again, that doesn't make a difference. I was in the Army with a white guy. In fact, I'm not sure his name wasn't the same as mine, but this guy had to shave his nose. Yeah, he was covered like an animal. But he wasn't an animal. He was a regular guy of Irish descent. Okay, so there again, people need to keep an open mind.
Right.
I asked this Bigfoot researcher 30 years ago. I said, can they be blonde? He said, yeah, they can be red, blonde, brown, or black. And now this couple of occurrences, they've been white or shimmering or kind of a whitish color. Maybe that's just because they're really old. I don't know. But it seems to me like this guy said there are some with 4 toes, some with 5, and some have been known to have 6 toes. What are the different species, or is it just like 2-3 brothers? One has blonde hair, one has red hair, one has brown hair. Maybe it's just that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot more to know about Bigfoot, and here's my conclusion of Bigfoot. They're too human to be an animal. They're too animal to be a human. So we're left with a quandary, and my mind's not made up what they are, and I'm willing to hear more stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you heard of the connection between like the they said that there have been some where they've seen Bigfoots like emerge out of UFOs.
I have heard
Um,
that.
yeah, so there seems to be a connection there as well, and that's a strange. But there also seems to be a connection between UFOs and like the giants. For instance, Barry Shamish, he wrote a book about the giants that visited Israel, and I believe it was like 1992 or something of that nature. And there was also a sighting in Russia where a whole group of school children witnessed these 9-foot beings come out of this craft in, I believe it was Verona or something with a V there in Russia. And so there seems to be connections between the giants and Bigfoot and also these unidentified flying objects, which in my mind, the extraterrestrials or ancient aliens, they are the fallen angels, the demonic, presence of the fallen angels in the description of what Enoch describes as, the watchers, the sons of God, mating with the daughters of man, creating the men of renown, that it's all the same thing, just here now in modern times.
Well, the connection between Bigfoot and the UFOs, the other explanation might be they're abducting them.
True that, yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
or maybe they're part of. I don't know. Yeah, I've
Right.
heard it twice now, and actually down to 651 up here, along that same road there. My brother, who's a cowboy, doesn't make stuff up. He won't stretch things. He'll make them less than they were. He saw a big light up there, and he watched it a while, and all of a sudden it just took off faster than any man-made plane could fly. And he says, I don't know what it was. It's an unidentified flying object. That's all he knew. But same path is right down 651. And that's where the Bigfoot, there's been 2 Bigfoot sightings that I know of out there. We've had a werewolf story that's can't even get into that. But I was writing a local newspaper article here for a while, and called Artistic License. I was just writing about everything. And I was criticizing, maybe I will tell the story. I was criticizing people for watching the Teenage Werewolf series, that was a bad show. I said, I know some Indian fellows from, I think they were Navajo. They were saying, well, that's real. These these shamans out there, whenever they get into do their dances or whatever, said their face is so contort that you'd think they're an animal. But they don't turn into an animal. I don't think their fingernails grow. But apparently when this demon, this spirit, this animalistic spirit takes them over, they act like an animal. He says they're bad. And so I'm just saying, look, this is nothing to play around with. So this is back in 87 or 8. All of a sudden, this guy starts writing into the newspaper, condemning me, and that he was a werewolf. He was afraid some bigot like me was going to shoot him with a silver bullet. I never even heard of this before, right? And he's telling about how on a full moon night he strips naked. He goes, "What? You're putting this in the paper?"
Oh my gosh!
He goes down to the canyon, which is right off 651. And last time he went out and ate a raccoon.
Oh my goodness!
I'm thinking,
Better get some rabies shots.
It was never, as it was a joke. In fact, went on all summer. The exchange between us, I took it as being someone crying for help, or it was a real thing. But at the very end, finally, the owner of the paper said, "What do y'all got a vendetta against Joe? You got to stop this thing, man." People were closing their windows at night, all kinds of stuff. Anyway, so the last letter was never published, but he wrote it to the editor, thanking him for giving him a voice, letting him have a platform to talk about all this. And it was typed up. I saw the letter. It was typed up on an IBM Selectric, this before computers. perfectly typed, no whiteout. Like this person knew what they were doing, like they were a writer or something.
Uh-huh.
It he never broke, and it's never since. No one's ever come by and said, "Yeah, we fooled old Joe, didn't we?" No one's ever confessed to it. No one's ever said, "Yeah, I know that guy was all a big joke." No one's ever said that. So I just have to take it at face value. Anyway, if you see some guy running around naked out here in Crosby on a 651, that's who it is.
Well, I absolutely believe that lycanthropy is a part of the historical tradition, and that Satanists involved in conjuring devils and demons and involved in being possessed by fallen angels, that kind of stuff can happen to them. But certainly there seems to be a black magic connection to this kind of capability, and that historically, the stories of individuals that undergo and have this kind of a transformation, again, we don't know the relevance of it, but certainly stories like that, there seems to be something behind them, even like with the UFOs and Bigfoot and giants and all of that, all of these just really strange and supernatural and esoteric subjects that they've been forever embedded into the human conscience and to the historicity of humanity, whether legends, myths, oral traditions, that these kind of things have, been part of the fabric of reality for a very long time. And so I do believe there's something to them, even though we may not understand fully what that is.
Well, that's why I call my conference "They Are Real." But just going, as I'm saying, this is not a joke. These people aren't making these things up. But as a Christian, to me, a Christian, we're obligated to understand life. We understand how we're going to help people if we don't understand things.
Right.
If you don't know anything about demon possession or drugs or abuse, how can you help people? Because you don't recognize why they're acting the way they are.
Right.
So, what if here's my last thing on Bigfoot. I've made this statement before. I don't see how they can be human beings because in 500 years of the gospel being preached in America, in various places all over the country, and these things can come right up to a building, they can hear, they can listen. If they were, the Bible says that God has his people among every nation, kindred, tongue, and tribe. That includes everybody. So why in 500 years has not one Bigfoot ever come forward and made a profession of faith in Christ?
Uh-huh.
Okay, maybe one will, but in all this time, so there again, that would be human. Doesn't matter if he's covered in hair. Don't care about that. But now the non-Christian's going to go, well, that's nonsense. I don't believe that stuff anyway. Okay, that's fine. But as a Christian, I've got to look at it that way. How do we define these things? Can they be shot like animals? Can we eat them like a hog? Are they hybrids? Are they part people, part human? Man. And there's other aspects. The Gigantopithecus is the giant ape of mostly in China. We don't know much about it. Is it possible that this is just that upright ape that's been around for all this time and didn't go extinct like they want you to believe? Maybe it's just that. And they have all these characteristics that are, look at what some birds do. They do some pretty complicated weaving with their beaks and all that sort of stuff. Fish can build little pyramids out there in the ocean that are mathematically correct. So could Bigfoot just be Gigantopithecus? And all these things are endemic to it? I don't know.
Lots to consider.
Jury
is out for sure. Hey, brother, we've got just 2 minutes remaining. And so if you would, can you share final comment? Anything as parting word to the listening audience?
Well, keep an open mind. Don't be gullible. Don't believe everything you hear, but take it in, analyze it, like the Bible says. Try all spirits, because all spirits are not of God.
Right.
And don't be narrow-minded. Well, I mean, some people are not narrow-minded. They're just lazy. They don't want to be challenged or do anything challenging. They don't want to be. So I don't mess with them. If someone just, I can't talk about that stuff. Okay, let's don't. Let's talk about the weather. But
Right.
the reason I appreciate guys like you, a lot of my flat Earth friends, a lot of my alien friends and UFO friends, and people I'm not supposed to hang out with. The reason I appreciate a lot of you guys, because you're looking, you're searching,
Right.
you're willing to ask hard questions and try to come up with answers. I really appreciate that, and that's what I'm trying to do. My
Yes.
perspective is as a Christian, and I'm going to try to influence people that direction. But that doesn't mean everybody else doesn't know some truth,
Right.
We're supposed to get knowledge. You get knowledge just about anywhere. We get knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. And I don't know, I'm just fascinated by these things, but I think we should know what they are. Because if they're demonic, if they're fallen angels, if they're going to have an influence on us, we need to know what they are and how to combat it if it's evil.
Right. Yeah, because I think, some of this is connected to the coming reign of the Antichrist, too. And certainly that the whole push that the extraterrestrials created us, I believe, is connected to strong delusion. And that is certainly on the forefront of human conscience right now.
Yeah, it is. And I'm not going to bring up another subject, but there's another subject connected to that I think Daniel speaks of, and I think that's where we are. So
Yes.
maybe some other time.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, brother, we appreciate you. Thanks for joining us.